Good morning. So my name is Alexi James. I'm actually here with Oracle. We're a proud sponsor of the event today, and I'm here to do a quick introduction of Tom. I'm actually filling in for another counterpart who couldn't make it today, so I apologize. I'm going to read through most of this, but thanks for joining, everyone. We don't have a booth, so if any of you guys want to chit-chat with me after the fact, just come and find me. I'm representing Primavera, which is a business unit within Oracle, which handles all of our project management solutions. So Tom Henry, our next speaker, senior consultant with Cabana Shutt, specializing in IT consulting, software selection, design, implementation, collaboration systems. Sounds like a lot of stuff you guys cover. Process analysis, optimization, not to mention, obviously, project coordination and project management. Tom received his BS in computer science from Bournemouth University in the UK and holds multiple Microsoft product certifications. Tom is actually also one of only a handful of certified facilitators in the US for PMI-CIE program. You guys want to help me joining Tom to the stadium? And
cheers, mate. Morning, everybody. Pleasure to be here. My name's Tom Henry, and I work for a company called Cabana Shutt. I'm not going to talk much more about that because we've already heard about it. Okay, so today we're going to look at Microsoft Project, and we're going to do some tips and tricks around Microsoft Project. So, who in the room has used Microsoft Project? Okay, now keep your hands up, keep your hands up. Keep your hands up if you like Microsoft Project. So about 3/4 stayed up, so you all pretty much like it, okay. So the reason you probably don't like it, in my experience, is because you haven't been shown how to use it properly or in the way that it should be used for optimal performance, okay. So that's what this session's for. So if that's not what you're here for, no, but seriously. All right, no one's leaving. That's good. I'm happy about that. All right, so we're all in the right place. So it's kind of an entry-level thing, but you will still learn stuff even if you've been using it for 10 years. I can promise you that. Okay, so this is a little bit about what we do as a company, Cabana Shutt. So we're actually a German-based company, well, European-based company. We've got 10 offices around Europe, and we recently come into the US about 4 years ago. I actually was based in the UK before. I moved out and I actually live in Houston now, which is pretty nice. Our main office is in Atlanta, so we're very local. We cover a lot of this area actually. So as you can see, I'm not going to talk too much. We've got 200 employees, so a lot of consultants, a lot of experience to draw on as a company. And here are some of the products we offer, things like that. I won't talk much more about that. Here's what we're going to look at today. Okay, so this is from a Microsoft project standpoint. Okay, so we're going to look at project planning, not planning your whole project. You know, I don't know how to do that for you guys, but from a Microsoft project standpoint, how do you plan your project in the tool? How do you plan out your tasks? Which tasks do you put in? Things like that. Okay, how do you put them into the tool? We're going to talk about the Microsoft Project scheduling engine. Okay, so one of the key things with Microsoft Project, it does have a scheduling engine, which helps you to figure out what's going on and how your project is going to play out over time. We're going to look at resource planning, something that most of you probably struggle with. It's probably the most difficult concept within Microsoft Project. We'll look at baselining. Okay, most of you probably understand baselining, even if you've never touched Microsoft Project before. Controlling your project. So once you've actually got your project set up and you've planned it all out and it looks really pretty, once your project starts, how do you keep it updated? Okay, that's where Microsoft Project really starts to give you value, okay, when you're updating it. And then we're going to do some Q&A. All right, so we'll see how we get on.
Will your slides be available to us after your session?
I believe so, yeah. If not, I've got a bunch of business cards here. Grab one and I'll email it to you. I'm pretty sure they make it available publicly. I'm not actually 100% on that one now. Okay. Sorry, I was actually in England last week and caught a cold, so I'm just recovering. Still got a bit of phlegm. All right, so project planning. Now, the way I like to think about it from a Microsoft project standpoint, and just backing up a little bit, I do a lot of training with different clients all around the world, actually. And this is kind of the concept that I kind of put up on a whiteboard. I draw a bucket and say, hey, we need to put all these things and make our bucket work for us. Okay, so this is the concept I'm going for. So for your project bucket, let's think of it as when you open a Microsoft project, you create a new project, right? We need to get that project to work in the way that we work, because all organizations are different. You all observe different holidays. You all may have projects that span different countries with different time zones, different working calendars, different resources with different things, all that kind of stuff, and it all comes into play and all impacts how long your project's going to take, really. Okay. So what we're going to do is set up the bucket, all right? So to do that, there's 4 main steps that you need to do, okay, to get that bucket working. We set the project start date. The project start date. Then we're going to set the project calendar. Then we're going to set up the options around the project, and then any custom fields that we may have. Okay, so let's look at those 4 different things. All right, so the very first thing you do in Microsoft Project is set the project start date. Okay, the reason I'm saying this like this, it seems pretty simple, but the first thing that most people do, if they haven't been told, is go into Microsoft Project and set the start date of the first task in the project. So does anybody know what that will do? Anyone? Big brains?
The baseline date?
Almost. Good try. It'll actually put a constraint on that date. If you adjust any dates in Microsoft Project, we're going to revisit this later. If you put any dates in Microsoft Project, it will apply a constraint, and that date will be it will not be flexible. It will not change. Okay. So we'll see why we use the start date. So we set the project start date. We're then going to set up the project calendar. Okay. So if you've got different calendars in your organization, if you're using a project online environment or a project server environment, those will all be specified by the organization. If not, you can set up your own calendars and say, yeah, I want it to be, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, but every other Friday we get a half day. Okay, you can do that. You can even say that in my organization we observe Labor Day, Memorial Day, Thanksgiving, but we don't observe, I don't know, Columbus Day. Thank you. Yeah, brain freeze there. So yeah, so you can set your calendar up to do all that. Once you've set the calendar up, we're not going to cover that unfortunately, but you would set your calendar right there. So you'd say, instead of the standard calendar, you would use the Campana Shop calendar, which is our working hours, right? Next thing you do is you can specify custom fields. Now, at the moment, they're blank because we didn't use any. But what you can do is you can set up custom fields. For example, for this project, I want to know which location it's going to be based out of. What office location, perhaps? Let's say what else you could do. You could say who the project manager is going to be. Who's our key executives on this project? Who's our primary stakeholders? How much do we think it's going to cost? What's our overall budget for this project? You can capture all that information in your project. Okay, so not only task information, but you can capture information about the project. You do that in custom fields. Okay, very easy to set up. The last thing, and this is one of the things that most people forget to do, is set up the project options. To get here, you go to click on the File button, and then click Options. In here, there are a whole array of options that you should set up, okay, to make it work for your organization. For example, if you don't set in here your working hours, then your calendar will be out of sync with the way that a day and a week and a month is calculated in Microsoft Project. So it's really key, okay? I can't go through them, but here's my recommended options, okay? So yeah, I think they should pretty much give you a set of these slides, hopefully. If not, take one of my cards and I'll send it to you by email. But here's the options I recommend that you set up in the tool, okay? I'd love to spend some time going through it with you. I don't have time to do that today. But yeah, there you go. All right, so that's going to help you out. If you follow those rules there, it will really help, okay? Next thing, task planning. So what I say to people to do is do a complete brain dump. Everything that you think needs to be done in your project, and try and keep it as high level as you can. Dump it into here. Ooh, that went ahead a little bit there. Okay, dump it in and just put the tasks in. So as you can see in here, these tasks are in no particular order. They're just all over the place. And I've just put task 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 just to make that clear, so you don't have to think about it too much. But they're not in chronological order, are they? I've just dumped them all in here, and they're not in order. So that's fine to do that. But then the first thing we need to do is put them into chronological order. Okay, so the project, as we go down, will be chronological order. So, it's gone from task 1, 3, 6, 9, 2, 5, 7, 4, 8 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Make sense? Put them into chronological order. The next thing, estimate the durations for those tasks. Pretty simple. Most of you have probably done that. But another thing, you can also estimate the work for the task. Okay, so you can say it's going to be a 5-day task, but there's only 20 hours of work involved in that task. Really important. Otherwise, by default, once you assign a resource to that task, you're going to get 40 hours of work by default. Okay, you can change it later, but this is a great way to kind of figure out, yeah, I've got these tasks, they're going to take X number of days, but there's not that much effort involved in those tasks. Makes sense. That's a real world scenario, right? Everybody does that. Like, nobody works full time on a task, do they? So come in and estimate your work effort as well. That column is not in Microsoft Project by default. Okay. Well, sorry, it is there, but it's not visible by default. Okay. So you can right click on any column and then click insert and then insert the work column. Once you've got the work column, you can start estimating work and duration. Or duration and work. Yeah.
I got on the call, but inside of the project, can you create a WBS that generates these tasks?
A WBS that generates the tasks?
Yeah, typically you start, with a work breakdown structure, with little sticky notes and all that. Figure out what your scope is and what your advance. Can you start at that stage to get to this stage, or is this? Typically how I do it is just exactly what you do, and I put tasks up there.
So yeah, there's different approaches, right? So some people use a deliverables-based work breakdown structure, whereby you'll just say what needs to be completed, right? 5 of those tasks, milestones or deliverables, whatever, and I'd make those a milestone in the project, and then I would specify what needs to be done to complete each of those things, right? So it doesn't matter how you put it in there. It's just you type it in. You can put in there phases, and you can put milestones using summary tasks and milestones, and yeah, you can do it that way as well. There is actually a Microsoft Project captures the WBS for you. If you go onto the Format ribbon, and then on the far right-hand side of the Format ribbon, you'll see the outline number checkbox. Check that, and it'll actually show you the 1, 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 5, and so on and so forth. Okay, it holds on to that, so you don't need to type numbers ever. Okay, so that'll be a nice little tip there. Okay. Next thing, linking tasks. Okay, pretty difficult sometimes. To do it simply, very easy, but to do it where it actually makes a lot of sense can be a little bit difficult. Okay, so there's different ways to do it, and no two people do it the same way. A lot of people will actually just come into the predecessor column here and start typing in predecessors. So we all know about predecessors and successors, I'd imagine, because we're all project management people, we're all in this room. So you can actually come into the tool and type in predecessors. So if you're a typing person, you like to put numbers in, do that. There's another way though. You can click on one task, drag down using the mouse, and use the link tasks button here. And that will actually dynamically link them for you and populate the predecessor column for you. Okay, so that's the way I do it actually. I'm not really a typing person, I'm more of a visual click and drag and click button. Everybody works differently. I appreciate all ways, but there's a couple of options. Make sure you do that. When you do this, you are telling the scheduling engine, which we haven't really talked about yet, but we'll get there. You're telling the scheduling engine the logical order in which these tasks need to be completed. Okay. Once you've put in the predecessors, Microsoft Project will give you dates. That's what it does. Okay, we specified the start date. That's the only date we specify. Once you specify the start date and linked tasks together, based on that one start date, Microsoft Project will push out the rest of the tasks and calculate the dates for you. So you can see here how those dates have been updated. And you can see like next to it is that you get the blue change highlight. Sorry, I clicked too far there. You get whenever a date is calculated for you or something changes, Microsoft Project will highlight it in that light blue color. We can see here. So it's calculated the dates for us based on the fact that we've linked the task and we've specified the start date. It calculates dates. That's what it does good. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about adding lags and leads, because this can be really beneficial in projects, because a lot of the time there's a delay, and when there's a delay, most people will just come in and type a date, okay, and then that date is inflexible and it has a constraint applied. That's not what I want you to do. If there's a delay between, let's say, task 3 and 4, as we've got on the example on the screen, if there's a delay, let's put a lag in between those two tasks. To do that, you would click on the link here between the two tasks, and then you'll get this task dependency dialog here. And in there, you can input a lag time. The benefit of using a lag over just going into the task and increasing the duration to kind of model the delay is there's no effort involved in that lag. Okay, that task 3 is a 3-day duration task. Therefore, there's pretty much 3 days of effort. If you go in and say, well, I need a 10-day lag after it, I'll make it a 13-day task. Well, you've just taken the cost of that and multiplied it by 3 or 4 times. Okay, it's not what we want. So always use lags. You can also use a lead time, model a lead time by doing a negative lag. Okay, so instead of clicking the up button there, you just click the down button, just here, and you get a negative lag. So you can kind of, I'm going to show you that later. All right, so a little bit about the Microsoft Project scheduling engine. And I kind of talked about this, but I want to really make this concrete in your minds, because this is the way that we need to start thinking about the product so that we can use it properly. Okay, so the only date we ever supply is the start date. You will be so tempted to put other dates in, but please don't. Okay, it won't work properly. You will put in the logical sequence of those tasks. Okay. The Microsoft Project Scheduling Engine will give you dates based on that. That's what you want. That's why we create schedules. Okay, in Microsoft Project is we can put in the dates, we can put in all the tasks, we can tell the scheduling engine the logical ties between those tasks, and it can give us the dates. Nobody can calculate that in their mind. It's too difficult. And what about if something changes? Let's say task 3 goes from 5 days to 20. What date will task 7 start on? Okay. If you were doing that in an Excel spreadsheet, okay, you'd have to go in, update all the dates, and kind of figure out the knock-on effects. And that doesn't even take into consideration the calendar and the working times. You know, maybe Saturday is a working day for certain people. You know, it takes all these into consideration. Really important. And that's what the scheduling engine does for you. Okay? So it's pretty simple. You just put the start date, put your tasks in, link the tasks up, and it'll tell you the dates. If it does nothing more than that for you, you know, great. That's really helpful, I think. Okay, next topic. Question, yeah?
What happens once you've linked the 10 tasks together? What happens if you wanted to put in a summary task to show logical groupings? What does that do to those linkings you've just created?
Okay, so if you were to, let's say we had these 10 tasks here, like so, this is the right screen for that. You could click on task 1 just there, click insert on the keyboard, or you could click on the task ribbon and click insert summary task. Okay, the summary tasks kind of collectively summarize the tasks within them. Okay, so the summary task, let's say the duration of all these tasks was, I think probably about April, May, so it's about 30 days there, right? It will tell you the duration of all of those tasks, okay? That's what it does. To insert those, you just click above it and insert the summary task. And if that doesn't work, you just indent the tasks beneath the summary task, and it'll actually make it a summary task.
Yeah, I'm thinking of 2 summary tasks. So will that keep, say task 1, 2, 3 is in one summary, and 4 to 9 is in a second summary. By inserting those 2 summary tasks, does it keep the linkage
Yes.
between all 9?
Yes, 100%. Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things is you never link summary tasks together. You link the tasks within them, And then that allows the summary task to represent what's going on within those tasks. Okay? Sorry, I didn't quite understand your question there. Okay, resource planning. So this is where it gets a bit complicated and a bit boring, to say the least. Okay? All right, so there are 3 different types of resources within Microsoft Project. Okay? There's work resources, cost resources, and material resources. Okay? The most common type of resource that you'll see in Microsoft Project is the work resources. Okay? These typically represent people, but they could be things as well, such as a crane, but it's anything that you prorate over time. So if Tom Henry works on a task for 1 day, that'll cost you $100. If he works on it for 5 days, $500. Okay? So the cost of that particular task is based on the duration and the resources assigned to it. Okay? So a work resource is a resource that you prorate over time, typically people. Okay? So that's the one you're probably going to use most of the time. However, there is another type, cost resources. These can be used to track fixed costs within your project. Let's say, for example, for my project, I've got a software development project. We need to spend $2,000 on new software, $5,000 on new hardware. I could track those in the project using a cost resource. So it's actually calculating everything as a whole. Another type of resource, material resources. Not that commonly used, but certainly if you're doing a construction project of some description, you could kind of use Microsoft Project to calculate the resources that you've used. Let's say, for example, I'm building a house and I want to capture the number of pallets of bricks that I use, the square footage of concrete that I've used. So as I'm watching the bricks come in and get loaded, I'm putting it into my schedule, 1 pallet, 2 pallets, 3 pallets, 4 pallets. And obviously you specified the price per pallet that you had to pay. That would then roll the costs into the project based on the number of resources that you've used. So I put in there, in the cost resources, that you can also track materials in there. So there's another way to track materials. If you're not worried about capturing how much stuff you used, okay, you could just get the invoice and put it into your project using a cost resource. And that'll just be a fixed cost, but you won't get that granularity into what kind of resources were used for your project. So let's say you're a building contractor and you want to kind of figure out how much does it actually cost to build a house in terms of resources, okay? You can capture that using the material resources. That'd be useful to look back on, okay? Okay, so assigning resources. This is where it gets fun. And I'm sure that for the 75% of you that have used it, this is where it gets fun. So when you assign resources, you give it 2 variables, whether you know it or not. You will give the scheduling engine 2 variables. Microsoft Project will calculate the 3rd for you, okay? So when you go into Microsoft Project and you assign a resource to a task, Microsoft Project most of the time will calculate how much work is involved in that task, okay? So let's say I've got a 5-day task and I assign a resource to work on it 100% of his time, okay? It would calculate out that he's going to get 40 hours of work on that task. If I assign a second resource, 80 hours of work for the task, okay? So it calculates all these things for you. So there's 3 variables in Microsoft Project. There's the work, that is the actual effort involved in that task, like man hours, so to speak. There's the duration. That's simply the time between the task's start date and the task's finish date. That's all of it represents. Doesn't relate to the work or how much effort's involved. You could have a 5-day task that's just 1 hour effort, okay? Might happen sometimes, maybe it's just a support person that's going to roam around and help out from time to time. Yeah. Then we have the assignment units. Now the assignment units are the typical percentage of somebody's typical working day that they're going to work on your task, okay? So kind of a mouthful, but it's the percentage of someone's day that they're going to work on your particular task based on their calendar. Okay, so if they work Saturdays, they're working 50% of Saturday, if that's what the assignment units that you specify. So it's based on their calendar and their typical working day. If you assign them at 100% full time if they're available, if you assign them at 50%, 4 hours a day if that's their calendar. Okay, I just wanted to make that clear. So yeah, when you specify 2 of these variables, when you are calculating out, your resources, it will calculate the third for you. So in our project at the moment, we've estimated for all tasks the duration and the work. So if I assign a resource right now, what's the third variable Microsoft Project is going to calculate? The units. Yeah. So if I assign 1 or even 2 resources, it'll calculate out the units based on how much duration we've got. So 5 days. How much work we've got. It's only 20 hours. If you assign 1 person, 50%. That's a really good added benefit, because unless you calculate out unless you estimate the work ahead of time, Microsoft Project won't calculate those units. They'll be assigned full time to that task. Okay, which means they're not available elsewhere, perhaps. Okay. Any questions around that? All right, good. So assigning resources to tasks, actually going and doing it in the tool. Okay. There's various different ways to do it, and everyone's got their preferred method of doing it. But there's only one place in Microsoft Project that gives you access to all of these 3 variables all in one screen. To get there, you'll go to the View ribbon, and you'll check the Details checkbox. And you'll see there the task form. If you've ever clicked on that Details checkbox and switched to different view there, you need to revert it back to the task form. So just make sure it says task form. Okay? And here we can see the task form. So we can see that we now have access to all 3 of those variables plus more. Okay? So we've got the duration there, we've got the units, and we've got the work. So for task 1, it's a 3-day task. Somebody's been assigned to work on it 100%. Microsoft Project calculated the work at 24 hours. Okay? Makes sense? Okay, so there's another red rectangle there, isn't there? The effort-driven. Who can tell me what effort-driven does? Okay, good. So I'm going to be helping you today. All right, so the effort-driven checkbox. What that will do is it will hold the work for the task constant. Okay, so at the moment this task, and we can see it right there on task 1, it has 24 hours of work associated with it. Okay, if I check that effort-driven checkbox, and then I assign a second resource, it will split the work for that task between the 2 resources, giving them 12 hours each. Okay, so the next scenario is, what is non-effort-driven if I don't check it? If I was to assign a secondary resource to that task as it stands with it not being checked, they would get an additional 24 hours of work, okay, making the task overall have 48 hours. Okay, so what's an example of an effort-driven task? The example that I always use is painting a room. Okay, I've estimated 24 hours of work to get this room painted. Okay, if it's 1 person, they're going to start here and they're going to walk all the way around and get around and finish here. There's 2 people, they're going to start in the middle and they're going to go in opposite directions and meet in the middle. It's going to take about half the time. Obviously, there's going to be some chit-chat and drinking cups of tea, but there's a diseconomies of scale with everything, isn't there? But you're going to go around and it's going to be done half the time. That's a effort-driven example. A non-effort-driven, a training class, similar to this. Every person in here is spending 1 hour. So at the moment we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, probably about 25 hours of effort going into this endeavor today, right? So yeah, use that and it will help you to model your assignments and calculate work for you in the product.
So,
yeah.
So in a project, you have tasks that will be this way and this way. Is it by task or is it by effort-driven? It can be done for the whole project or by task?
It's on a task-by-task basis, but you can set the default in that project options dialog. Okay, one of the recommended options is make effort-driven unchecked. Actually, I prefer not to have it checked, but you could make it effort-driven for every task. If you're doing something where it's construction, then you probably want to do that. If you're calculating out the work, you'd want to make it effort-driven. So if you have more resources, the duration is decreased. Okay, but yeah, so it's a project thing. You can set it up in the options so that by default tasks will become effort-driven, but you can also go in after the fact and make them more effort-driven. There is actually a column in Microsoft Project called effort-driven. You can insert that column and fill down and make them more effort-driven quite quickly.
So Tom,
yeah.
That, so if you have a task one, for instance, 3 days, and you have one resource, and, you know, you're looking at the column over there, it's got the resource name.
Mhm.
If you just plop somebody else's name in there as a second resource, does it automatically make it effort driven at that time?
No, no, it won't adjust any of these variables. That's why when I'm assigning resources, I'll actually bring up this form, and you can assign a secondary resource just here. If you click just below that name, you will get a drop down and you can add the next person.
But you definitely have to click the effort driven to get it to do the work.
Yep, correct. That's the only way to do it. Well, there's other ways, but that's the best way. Okay, another spanner in the works. But, you know, most of you have probably heard of these things before. So, task types. All right. So in Microsoft Project, you have the ability to fix one of the variables. Remember, work, units, duration. You have the ability to fix one of those three. By default, out of the box, it's going to be fixed units. You can overwrite that in the project options, okay? But I like to stick with fixed units. I like it. So basically, we've got three variables. Whichever one we fix, that's then the pivotal point, okay? So I like to do this kind of example. So if I've got fixed units and I adjust the work, the duration is going to give, okay, based on the units, which are 100% by default, okay? If I adjust the duration, the work will give, so on and so forth. Sometimes you don't want the duration to change. You want to specify a 5-day duration, and you want it to stay at 5 days because you know it's going to take 5 days, regardless of anything else, right? Good scenario. That happens in a lot of organizations. They just want fixed duration the whole time. In that task type, just there, I don't know why I keep pointing down here, you can't see it. In the task type up there, you can switch that to be fixed duration. And yes, you can do that by default for all projects moving forward by doing that in the project options dialog. Okay. You can switch that to fixed duration. Therefore, every time you specify duration, it's somewhat fixed. Okay. If you adjust the work for the task, the assignment units will give. If you assign more and more resources, the work will give. Okay, but the duration will stay the same. So some food for thought there. Have a play with it. That's the best way to kind of figure it out. Okay.
Wait, did you say you can adjust this for the entire project, like going to project options?
Yep. Project options, and then there's like a whole dialogue. Skip back just a second. I'm a kind person. It's all right.
Okay.
So see here in the I think it's scheduling options. Yeah, there we go. New tasks are effort driven. Oh, I didn't specify the task type, but it's in there in the scheduling section as well. Task types.
Okay.
Default task type.
Thank you.
No worries. But yeah, that's why that project options, it really does matter, and people don't even think to look in there, but it's a great place to really get the tool working in the way you want it to work. Okay, oh, this is the only form that provides access to all of these variables. So please use it. I use it all the time for assigning resources. Okay. Any more questions before we move on from resources? Anyone want to throw a scenario out there that they've painstakingly created a schedule and it just can't work out? Yeah?
So what if you have a resource that will work 5 days a week and you have a resource that will work 4 days a week? Do
Okay.
you have individual resource calendars?
Correct, yeah. So you could set up for each person their own calendar. Now if you're using an enterprise tool such as Project Server or Project Online, I don't know if you've heard of those tools. I can talk to you later about those if you like. But you can specify a enterprise level, and that can be kind of set up in Active Directory, somebody's working calendar. You know, they only work Monday through Thursday, they take Fridays off. Maybe they work part-time, whatever the case may be. That can all feed down. But if you haven't got that kind of solution, you can set up a resource and specify the calendar for each resource and do it like that. So calendars are found in 3 places, just talking about calendars a little bit. They're found in 3 places in Microsoft Project. The first place is the project calendar. Okay? By default, every task will get that calendar, and that's the way that each task will work. You can even go into a task and specify a calendar just for that task. Let's say it needs to be done at the weekends, and we've got a weekend work calendar that I created. You know, you can do that. Every resource also has a calendar. Okay, so there's kind of a hierarchy there. So the project calendar, that's the first one, that's the default that every task gets. If you assign a task calendar, that overwrites the project calendar for that task. If you assign a resource, it just overwrites the task calendar and the project calendar for that task. Okay, so the resource calendar is the kind of the trump card. As soon as you assign a resource, that's how this task is going to work. That makes sense, right? And it will also, if you have more than one resource, it will do collective assignments and figure it out based on both of the resources' availability and schedule out the task and calculate the duration based on that. It's really clever and cool stuff when you start playing with it. Okay, so baselining. Really important step if you're going to actually learn from what you did in your project. Okay. How are we doing for time, by the way? How long have I got left? I don't even know when this session ends. 10:50. What time is it now? 10:15. Okay, plenty of time. Hopefully, I'm always optimistic. All right. So baselining. So we've got our project as it stands. Let's say we've gone in there, we put our tasks in, durations, effort, linked all the tasks together. We've assigned resources, and it's looking beautiful. We're so proud of ourselves, right? What we need to do at this stage, before we start the project, is baseline. What this essentially does, it takes a snapshot of the schedule as it stands at the end of planning. Okay, so we're moving from the planning stage into the execute stage. Rules might be named slightly differently, but that's what I'm going to go with. So we're going to snapshot all the information in the schedule right now. What that actually does, for anybody that's used baseline before, it will capture the task's start date, the duration, the finish date, the work, the cost, and copy it into the baseline duration. I'm just going to put up this little table here. So it takes the duration, duration, start, finish, work, cost, and puts it over into the baseline duration, baseline start, baseline finish, baseline work, baseline cost. Okay? For each task. Those baseline values never change. The actual current schedule dates will definitely change, okay? Because as the project's updated on a weekly or monthly basis, those dates are all going to change. The work's going to change. The cost is going to go up and down, as do all projects, right? So the benefits of capturing that baseline is we can, we can compare back to what we planned we were going to be doing and what we're currently doing today, and do some variance analysis, okay? So unless you capture that baseline, you won't be able to see what you thought you're going to be doing compared to what you are doing, okay? So you won't be able to see how far your project is off plan, okay? Any questions before we move on? To do that, you just simply click on the project ribbon, set baseline, okay. There's actually 11 baselines in Microsoft Project. The one that all of your variances will be calculated from is baseline. In the industry we call it baseline 0. It's baseline with no number after it. Okay. There's also baseline 1, baseline 2, baseline 3. But use that baseline 0, which is the default. That's the one that all the variances will be calculated from. Okay. So you can baseline the entire project. You can also baseline for selected tasks. Let's say we've got a very long 2-year project and we only want to baseline a stage as we're approaching it or as we're currently in it. All right. So if we're doing stage 1, let's baseline just stage 1 and we won't baseline stage 2, 3, 4, and 5. You can take a staged approach because you don't know what you're going to be doing in stage 2 and you don't want to be held accountable because that's 3-4 months from now. So you can do just selected tasks whereby you would go into the project, select all the tasks in phase 1, okay, baseline those ones using the selected tasks option. Okay, once you've baselined, you're good to go. Now this is the bit where most people stop. All right? Oh, I've created a schedule. Yeah, what more do you want from me? Well, if you update that schedule on a weekly basis, I recommend typically a weekly or even daily if you're that anal about it. If you update it, it can help you to gain insight into your project. I'm going to see how it can help conceptually right now. So every week, these are the recommended options that I would say every project should go through. Okay? We'll discuss them in more detail. So the first thing you need to do is figure out who's going to update your schedule. Now, if you're working in teams or if you're just a single project manager, it's probably going to be you, but perhaps you have a scheduling team, perhaps you outsource it to another country for them to update your schedules for you. Yeah, good luck with that, right? It's going to be you most of the time, all right? So as a project manager, what are you going to be doing each week? There's different tracking methods within Microsoft Project. You need to figure out, before you start, how much detail are you going to go into in terms of tracking your project. You can capture just the % complete for each task. So go in, it's Monday, and we are 5% complete. You can go in and do that, but that's it. You can also use the actual work and remaining work method, whereby you would go in, say on a Friday afternoon, you say, for task 1, I've done 25 hours work and I have 5 hours left. Microsoft Project will calculate the % complete for you. Okay, so 85% complete or something like that. Okay, then there's another method, and these are getting more complex as we go through, not complex, but more sophisticated as we go through. Okay, the actual work per period. So you can actually go into the tool and say, Tom Henry did 5 hours on Monday for the task 1. He did 2 hours on Tuesday, 3 hours on Wednesday for task 1, and maybe 4 hours on Friday for task 2, and 2 hours on Thursday, whatever. So you can go in and get into that granularity as well. If you're using an enterprise tool such as Microsoft Project Online or Project Server, you can actually use Project Server timesheets and have your resources go into the system, specify how many hours they did on each task, send it back to you. You will then approve it, and it will dynamically do this piece for you. It will dynamically update your schedule based on those timesheets. And what you approved and what you didn't approve will not go back into your schedule. You'll have to make some changes. Okay, so that's tracking methods. You need to figure out which level of granularity you're going to go into and try and keep it consistent. Okay. How often? Figure out how often you're going to update it. You're going to do it hourly? Probably not. Weekly? Most likely. You can do it daily, yearly, whatever the case may be. It's up to you, but keep it consistent. If you're going to be having a whole team of project managers, let's get everybody on the team working in the same way. You know, that's kind of an important thing. Otherwise, nobody really knows how up-to-date everyone's projects are. Maybe you're collaborating and sharing ideas on these things. So decide as a team how often you're going to update it. I typically, in most organizations that I work with, it's a Friday afternoon, pretty much. How are you going to obtain these updates? So, you know, you've assigned all these resources to do work on your project. How are you going to get the updates from them? You're going to have a weekly team meeting. You're going to email them. You know, figure that out. You know, what's the process? All my team members must shoot me an email by 1 o'clock on a Friday afternoon telling me what they did this week. Good idea, right? Maybe that'll work for you. Maybe it's a team meeting on a Friday afternoon. Or you can use those timesheets that I was talking about and have your team members go in and fill timesheets out and then send you the updates and it will dynamically update your schedule. That's the optimal way. Really nice. Okay, so I skipped back one, missed it. So this cycle, let's talk about this cycle. There's no real entry point here. It doesn't really matter where you start. But the place that I always start for a good reason is the project status date. Okay. So let's say, for example, I've got all my updates in a team meeting on Friday, and our team meeting was at 4 o'clock and it went on until 6. By 6 o'clock, I wasn't going to update my schedule. I went home. I come in on Monday morning and I want to update my schedule. The status date would be Friday, because that's the date the information that I'm inputting into the schedule is valid to. It could be that they worked on a Saturday and Sunday. I don't know that until the next week, right? So the status date would be Friday. That's not the only reason either. There's another reason for it. Then we're going to capture the updates. So we talked about that, you know, emails, meetings, whatever the case may be. We're going to update the project progress with these updates. I'm going to show you how to do that. We're going to reschedule anything that did not get completed on time. Because if you don't reschedule that work, we can't see the knock-on effects of work not being done when it should have been. Right? We need to see the impact. If that's on the critical path, we need to see how that's impacting the finish date of our project. Then we can make other necessary manual revisions to kind of pull our project back on track. You know, so if things go wrong, what corrective actions can we take? Microsoft Project can really help you to understand how to correct the things that have gone wrong. And I'm going to show you some of those methods as well. Okay, so to set the project status date, you can click on the project ribbon in the top right-hand corner. You see status date. Just click in there and input the date that the information in the schedule is valid to, typically Friday afternoon. All right. The next thing we're going to do is update the project progress. Now, to do that, I'm going to talk about the % complete method, the simplest of them all. At least try and do this one. If you can go into the next ones, great. But try and at least do the percent complete. So you'll go in on a daily basis and you specify, you know, I said daily, weekly basis, whatever, the percent complete of each task. Okay? So I go in, I click on task 1 and I specify 75%. There's a button to do that for you in the task ribbon as well. Okay? When you do that, you must, and this is, if you're not going to do this, it's not even worth capturing the updates. Okay? You must go in and put the actual start date. Okay? So you'll see there's a column in Microsoft Project called the actual start. And you'll find that column, if you right-click and insert a column, you'll see that actual start. But a better way to do that is to go into the View ribbon, and in the Schedule section of the View ribbon, in the Data section of the View ribbon, change the tables here to the tracking table. That's the table that we see right here on screen. This is called the tracking table. What this table does is exposes various columns in Microsoft Project that help us to track project progress. Tracking table. And you'll find it here. Click on the tables drop down. There's a whole bunch of tables. If you like Microsoft Project, click on those tables and it's just going to be a whole new world for you. Basically, they're just different collections of columns grouped together to help you to achieve certain things. Okay? So if we're tracking, here's the table that's going to help you to track your project progress. So once you've specified a percent complete, you must come in and say the date that it actually started. If you don't, Microsoft Project will assume the planned start date. So basically, eventually every task is going to be marked complete, and unless we've specified the actual start date for some of these tasks, what's going to happen? They're all going to start and finish on plan, as per like what we originally planned, because we never updated it really. Okay, so very important. Please remember that. Equally, once a task is marked as 100% complete, Microsoft Project will assume the planned finish date. If that's not correct, go in there and change that. Microsoft Project will actually adjust the duration as well based on the actual start and actual finish date. So always add this actual start and actual finish. Okay? If you're using either the percent complete method to track project progress or the actual work and remaining work, you must still do that for both. So there is actual duration and remaining duration. Actual work and remaining work, they're two different sets of columns. They pretty much do exactly the same thing. It's just if you do the actual work, you're actually capturing how much work effort was done. If you're doing actual duration, you're talking about how long it took. And you don't care about what work went on within that time. So obviously the actual work and remaining work gives you that extra granularity. But if you don't know how much work was done and people aren't telling you that, you can go for actual duration and remaining duration. Like, how long have you spent on this task? Oh, 4 days. How long have you got left? 2. Okay, put that in, right? And that'll work. So consider using other tracking methods to improve accuracy in your schedule. Actual work, remaining work, that's a very common one for people just using Microsoft Project. If you're using Microsoft Project Server or Project Online, then you're going to get those timesheets and you get that extra level of granularity, and you don't even have to worry about the actual start and actual finish, because Microsoft Project will actually look at the date that tasks were first entered in somebody's timesheet. That's our actual start date. Okay, rescheduling incomplete work. So let's say task 1 was 75% complete, right? And it was due to finish last Friday, but it didn't get done. So we've probably got like a day's work left to do, for example, just over a day's work left to do. Come Monday, what we'd need to do is have the rest of task 1 finished on Monday, right? So what we need to do is push out task 1 for the remaining work to be scheduled on Monday. Because what that's going to do is, obviously we've got our links that are going to go down, and we're going to see the knock-on effect. So our project's now going to be about a day late, right? If it was the critical path, as we've got in our schedule, where it's just completely, goes straight down. So to do this, and this is something that people generally forget to do, okay? Click on the task, click on the project ribbon, and on the far right-hand side in the status section, you see Update Project. Stands to reason, you're updating your project. It's a nice little dialogue. This dialogue has 2 different sections. The top section, the Update Project Progress, I never use that. But the bottom section, I use this every single time. Reschedule incompleted work to start after. By default, that date, can anybody guess what that date's going to be? Today? Good guess. No, you're all very close. There's one other date that we set just now. Okay, no one quite said it, but that's that project status date. And we set that saying to the project is scheduled, the information in the schedule is valid to this date, which was that Friday. Okay, we set that first. That date there in the reschedule selected task will always be that status date. So it will reschedule the work to start after that date. Make sense? So it's all going to start on Monday, basically. Even if we're updating our schedule on the Monday, work's starting this morning, right? Because we set the status date to that Friday. Makes sense. We'll get that. That's good. All right. So yes, reschedule incomplete work to start after. Do it for selected tasks because you don't want it to just go in and just whoosh, do it all for you. You do the ones in the start of chains of events. Okay. So if you've got like a couple of different kind of like threads going through your schedule, you just update the ones at the start that are running late, and it'll push out the rest for you because they're linked. Okay, so that's a nice little tool there. Kind of complicated. You have to click on that reschedule complete work start after, then use that selected task, and you've got to remember to select the task in the first place. Okay, but if you use that, it's really easy. It does all the calculations for you. What it would do is, in that scenario, it would actually, it's kind of complicated, but it would update the resume date for that task. There's actually a column in Microsoft Project, not many people know about, it's called resume. Basically, if you set that date, it will say that there's a break in the work, we're going to finish it here, right? So it would actually set a resume date, so the remaining work, the work that's been done, that'll stay exactly where it is, but it'll split the task and push out just that little last section into the future. That's what the tool will do for you. Now, if there was no work done at all, it would calculate it in a slightly different way. It'd actually use a scheduling constraint to push that work out if no work had ever been done. So it kind of figures these things out for you and takes the busy work out of it. That's the reason I like it. Okay, and there you go. You can see how it would take that last section of work and push it out to that following Monday. Pretty cool. Okay, getting your tasks back on track. So you probably will recognize these words, being that we're at a PMI event. So to get your schedule back on track, there's 3 options available to you: fast tracking, crashing, and descoping. Okay. So the first thing we can do is run tasks in parallel. It's called fast tracking. So let's say something's gone wrong. We're two months behind schedule. Your boss has come up to you and said, "Hey, you've got a problem. You need to kind of fix this." You can actually use the schedule to figure these things out to see where you can possibly save some time. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and we're going to use the first method. And we'll run some tasks in parallel. Okay. Maybe we need to get additional resources. That's fine. They're giving you the budget. Run them in parallel. Go for it. Another option would be crashing. Kind of touched on this a little bit. So we're going to assign additional resources, effort-driven, right, to reduce the duration of that task. Okay, so that would be crashing. The next method would be descoping. So maybe we're going to just cancel some tasks. We're going to say we're not doing this particular functionality if it was a software development product. Perhaps if it was a house construction project, perhaps we're not going to build the pool anymore, right? Cancel some tasks. Another way to do it would be to decrease the duration of certain tasks and say we're going to build a pool, but it's just going to be a paddling pool now, right? So it's descoping it. All right. So the first method, fast tracking. To run 2 tasks in parallel that were previously running one after the other, for example, what you can do is you can double click on the link between those 2 tasks. Okay, to bring up that task dependency dialog. Do you remember the dialog where we could input the lags and the lead times? Okay, You double click on the link between the two tasks and make that relationship, and you've probably all heard of this being that we're in a PMI event, start to start. Okay, so you can actually model those relationships in that task dependency dialog. I wish I had that on my, I should bring that up actually. I'll adjust my things before I send it out to anybody. But yeah, bring up that task dependency dialog, make the task dependency type start to start. There's also other ways, you can do start to start, finish to finish, start to finish, finish to start. All those four are modelable within Microsoft Project. Okay, so yes, you can run tasks in parallel. The next option, using that effort-driven, okay, we're going to crash our schedule. We're going to add additional resources to split the work and decrease the duration. So you must use the effort-driven to do that. And that will be done in the task form, just like what we were looking at earlier. Remember, effort-driven holds the work for the task constant. If you check that effort-driven checkbox and then assign a secondary resource, that work will be split. If you don't, you're just adding more work and the duration will stay the same. It's a really important step if you're going to be doing crashing. Descoping. Okay, so we've got a couple of options for descoping. Okay, so the first option was to decrease the duration. It's not really indicated very well on this slide, but basically, yeah, we took the duration from 3 days down to 2. It's one way to do it. Okay, that descopes it. Perhaps you could adjust the work for it and decrease the work. Perhaps you would unassign a resource and say only Tom's working on it. If whatever he gets done, I don't care. The next option would be to inactivate tasks. So if anybody's using a version previous to 2010, this function is a new feature introduced in Microsoft Project 2010. Basically, you can go into select some tasks and make them inactive. And you'll see on the schedule, they're grayed out. So it's better than deleting them because you can see that they were there originally. And in the baseline, they're there. But moving forward, we're making them inactive. No work will be scheduled on these tasks. The project scheduling engine will completely disregard them and move on. And you can see that on the Gantt chart here. See how it's just it's looking at the predecessor of the inactive task. It's kind of joined it up. But it's goes straight down to the next task. So it's completely disregarding those inactive tasks. Great way to do it. Don't delete tasks, make them active. Question?
I came in here with a specific question for you. I just got notified yesterday that we're going to push tasks out by a quarter. So they're not active in this release for 4.15. They'll be active in 1.16. So we have to inactivate them and then reactivate them. But I want to capture that they're inactivated for our 4.15 and activated for 1.16. How do you do that?
Well, what I would do is I would not inactivate them at all. Okay.
Really?
I would move them to the next stage in the project. You say you're going to shift them out into the future?
Yeah, but I want to show people that they don't have to worry about that right now. And I mean, we have it chronologically in order. So when we do it again, I want to be able to tell the project sponsors,
I got you.
This was our original plan. This is what you asked me to do. This is what we ended up doing, and this is how it affected the overall effort. Because this is part of.
Got it. I've done this before. Okay. So what you would do is you would inactivate them here. You can actually double click on a task and bring up the task information dialog. And in there, you'll see a notes column. Inactivate them in stage 1. Put a note saying these tasks are not being done here for whatever reason. Put your initials, put a date stamp on there. Everyone knows in that stage that these aren't being done. Go down to the future stage, a year later or whatever the case may be. Insert those tasks, whole new tasks, okay? Exactly the same name.
Right.
Say these are the tasks that were not done in phase 1.
Okay. That's
Okay? So use task notes to document like extenuating scheduling situations. Yep. Double click on the task. There's a notes column. Sorry, notes tab. Click in there. Put it in. You can also click notes in the task somewhere.
Thank you.
That icon there will bring up the notes. Looks like a note. All right. Cool. So that's descoping, making tasks inactive. All right. Back to our project update cycle. So let's recapitulate somewhat. So we set the project status date. We all know what that does now, right? Helps us when we're rescheduling work. And it lets everybody know if somebody else is looking at my project, the date the information in the schedule is valid to. Okay? We can capture the updates. How are we going to do that? Team meetings, whatever the case may be, emails. I'll let you figure that out. Updating the project progress. Which tracking method are we using? You've probably already decided which one you might use, which will work for your company. Rescheduling incomplete work. Well, once you set that status date, it's very easy. You just click on a task to select it. Click on the project ribbon, update project, use the dialog to select the reschedule incomplete work to start after. That will be the status date, which would be that Friday. Press OK, done. Simple. Don't forget to do that, because once you've rescheduled incomplete work, you can see the knock-on effects in the future. Okay, best practices. Oh, did I miss one there? Making necessary revisions as well. So, getting your schedule back on track. We've looked at those 3 different methods there. And perhaps you want to add some more tasks. Perhaps you want to add additional resources. All that can be done there as well. Okay? So each week you can redo your whole schedule if you like. It doesn't matter. So best practices, there are more best practices that I have, but based on what we've learned today, here's my real big points here. Okay? Only link tasks where there's a true dependency. So most people will set up all their tasks, create a whole bunch of tasks, and they will only create, sorry, lost my train of thought there. So most people will go in and they will set up a bunch of tasks, and they will just link them all, regardless of the logical order of those tasks. The real way that we should be doing this, let's say we're building a house, we've got to dig the foundations before we can lay the cement. Okay, that's definitely a dependency there. But for example, laying the carpet and laying the wood floor in the kitchen, well, that might be the same contractor doing it, but there's no logical dependency there. Both tasks could be done simultaneously. So don't link them, because there's no true dependency. And let's say we wanted to save some time later on down the line. We're not considering resources at this point. Okay. If we once we've assigned that resource and we decide, yeah, it's going to take 2 weeks for that one contractor to lay the carpets, then lay the wood flooring in the kitchen. If we want to save some time, we can assign a secondary contractor, bringing that duration in half, and that's going to save some time. So that's the reasons behind not creating a dependency unless a true dependency exists. Question?
What would be the start date?
I beg your pardon?
What would be the start date of that task?
Okay, so if a task has no dependency, project start date. Yeah. So as soon as you can get a task done, get it done, right? I mean, if we've got unlimited resources, everything will be done on the first day of the project, right? Unless those true dependencies exist. Okay, never input start and finish dates with tasks. Never go into them and say, right, this task will start on this date. Why don't we do that? You'll constrain that date. It will not be flexible. If I go into a task and specify a start date for it, that task will never be able to start any earlier than that date. You will get a start no earlier than constraint on that task. And if your project is moved forward a month, let's say we do a fiscal planning and, we're going to start in January, we're starting in December, well, that task, once you've updated the project start date, will not change. Everything else will shift, but that task will still be set out there in the future. So please, I wish that Microsoft, and I've spoken to them about this, I wish that they would make the start and finish dates read-only, because you don't need to use them. You really don't.
So when you go to enter a new task, it will automatically put the project start date.
Correct.
Same as the predecessor. The predecessor drives that.
Correct. So everything will be scheduled from the project start date unless you've given it a dependency, a predecessor. Yeah. Yep.
You have sometimes some dates that
Okay. In that scenario, where there is a true dependency, let's say materials aren't going to arrive until the first week in February, right? We can't start, I don't care what else is going on. It doesn't really impact it because we cannot start this task until the first week of February, okay? In that case, you could double click on the task, go to the Advanced tab in the Task Information dialog, and there's an option drop-down box called Constraints. And you can go in there and you can specify that the task will not start any earlier than a given date. So you go into the Advanced tab, task dependency type, select it from there, and you say start no earlier than, specify the date. Whenever I add a constraint to a task, because it's so easy to accidentally create one, I will always add a task note to it as well. So I'll go in and say, this task cannot start any earlier than February 1st because of the materials from XYZ contractor. Right? Makes sense.
This is under dependency what?
Task dependency.
Task dependency, thank you.
Okay. Does that answer your question? Somewhat complicated, but you only should have like one or two of those in your entire schedule. Okay. Use a percentage lag. So you know how we went in and we said 5-day lag? You know, you can use a percentage in there as well. You can say 50% lag. Okay, that will keep it dynamic. So maybe use that. Avoid constraints. Okay, so if there are these logical dependencies where, you know, the materials aren't going to arrive, or we just don't want to start this stage of the project until that date for whatever reason, the CEO says we're not allowed. Okay, use the constraints at that point, but be very sparing. Use as many as necessary, but as little as possible. Okay, if you can do away without them, then great. But most projects will probably have like 2 or 3. Whenever you add a constraint, add a note to it as well. Avoid manually scheduled tasks. Okay, so out of the box, Microsoft Project will schedule everything manually scheduled. What this essentially does is it turns off the scheduling engine. It's the most ridiculous thing in the world. But I think the reason they did it, Microsoft did it, is because they wanted to win people's business over from the #1 competitor of Microsoft Project. Sorry, it's not you guys. It's Excel, actually. So if you use manually scheduled tasks, it's just like Excel. Okay? So don't use it, because we want to utilize the power of the scheduling engine. So in the project options dialog, and using those recommended settings, you will set that the task type, no, not the task type, task mode will be auto-scheduled as opposed to manually scheduled. So if you ever see the little blue pins in Microsoft Project, that's manually scheduled. If you ever adjust the duration of a summary task in Microsoft Project, for those of you who know what those are, it will make that summary task manually scheduled as well, because you're like overriding what you told it should be summarizing. Next steps. So talk to us about Project Online, Microsoft Project Training. So I'm one of the trainers for Campana Shop, and I'd love to talk to you more if you've got other specific questions. I'm going to be here till about 12. On top of this, we're actually, the very next session is going to be in this room, and I'm going to be doing it. We're actually going to be doing kind of a hands-on lab and letting people get to play with Project Online. If any of you have heard of that, it's like the enterprise tool that Microsoft Project uses. Project Server, it's the same thing. Microsoft Project, and we're also going to be showcasing these wonderful Surface Pro 3, so you can, if you want to play with them, stay behind for that next session. It is limited to 10. There's only 10 of these available, so you need to sign up outside on the back wall, just there, if you want to sign up. Then you can stay in here and you can play along. No, just kidding. Of course you can. You can all stay if you want. I don't really care, but there's only 10 of these, so you'll be limited. Okay. If you want, I'd probably be showing some stuff on screen as well. So, yeah.
I have a question. So a lot of times we will do red, yellow, green.
Yep.
Show our task. How can you incorporate that into Microsoft Project?
So you can actually use formulas in Microsoft Project. You can use colored indicators in Microsoft Project, and it will do all that for you. You can have it calculated, so it'll actually look at if the task goes past the baseline start date by more than 5 days, make it red. If it's more than 3 days, make it yellow. If it's under 3 days, make it green. So we've got indicators. If you insert,
inserting columns and then
putting a formula on that column, yeah, it's really cool. Works easily. Yeah, and then you can, for that, it would actually create a custom field for the task. And then, well, for the project, there'd be a task level custom field, so any task can utilize it. And then for that custom field, you can specify colored indicators. Happy faces, frowny faces, whatever you want. Okay, so I don't have my phones. I'm not sure how we're doing on time. But Any questions? So if you're interested in finding out more about Microsoft Project or anything like that, we're a consulting partner, Campana Shop. I have a limited number of business cards in my pocket, and I'd be happy to talk to you more. We have actually got a stand out there. There's more information about the company and what we do. I will hand back over now, and if you want to stay behind, I've got a few minutes after, but then I've got to start the next session. So go and sign up for that quickly. You can run out and go and sign up. But yeah, there's up to 10 slots. We have more, whatever. All right. Thank you very much for listening to me today. Appreciate it.